And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment of Cowboy State Politics Live. From very high above all the puerile and insipid bombastic twits in the Wyoming mainstream media, this is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the depths of the Middle Swamp in Wyoming's capital of Cheyenne. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Tuesday. I can't tell you how happy I am to be back behind the microphone. You know, I had to take yesterday off just so I could travel down to the Middle Swamp. And to be perfectly honest with you, my friends, I have been a little under the weather. Every single time I come down to the Middle Swamp, I get the swamp sickness or the swamp virus or the swamp plague, whatever you want to call it. But this entire town is nothing but a gigantic petri dish, and it gets me every time. Yeah, some years worse than others. Fortunately, this time around, it wasn't too terrible. Just knocked me down for a day. But anyway, I'm back at it, and I'm happy to be down here in the Middle Swamp. Well, I'm happy to be behind the microphone. I don't know about being down in the Little Swamp. But we begin this morning with the press conference that was given last Friday in Speaker of the House Chip Nyman's office. Have you noticed anything in the media, or rather, a better question, have you noticed anything that's not in the media or hasn't been in the last few days? Well, I'll give you a couple minutes to think about it, but there was a press conference that was held in Speaker of the House Chip Nyman's office on Friday morning at 7:30. I was there, as well as members of the lamestream Wyoming incestuous media. But frankly, if you listen to the press conference, which is available on Cowboy State Politics on the podcast, I published the entire thing on Saturday. But what you haven't seen is a single article written about anything that was said in that press conference. And I think one of the big reasons why is yours truly was in attendance. It's very hard to twist things when you know that one of your other colleagues, and I don't even, colleagues, that's such a terrible word for this whole situation, but it's very difficult to twist what was said when the entire thing was published. And I haven't seen a single article. Now, in the press conference, if you go back and listen to it, and again, it's on the podcast for a weekend update, the Speaker of the House, Chip Nyman, and Appropriations Chair John Baer, and Majority Whip Ocean Andrew, they busted out some serious conservatism during the press conference. Now, I didn't agree with some of it, but still, it was some pretty serious conservatism, and I expected Trotsky Wolfson or Maggie Mullen of Wildfile to it, or I guess she's the part of the turkey vulture. But anyway, I expected them to write an article, and you haven't seen a single one. And it's because I think that it was impossible for them to twist any of it. So anyway, I'm going to continue going to the speaker's press conferences every Friday morning, and we'll see if we can get the Wyoming lamestream media to engage in some of the conservatism that's been talked about. But as of yet, haven't seen anything, and I can tell you that I'm definitely not surprised. Now, on the program, I'm going to go ahead and leave the phone lines open the entire show. Haven't really talked to anybody in our listening audience for a while. So if you want to be part of the program, the phone number here at the Swamp Studio is 307-374-8989. If you've got something on your mind that you want to talk about, the phone number right here in the studio is 307-374-8989. Go ahead and give me a call. Let's see here. Some other program notes that I need to make you aware of. On tomorrow's installment of the program, I'm going to be introducing a new sponsor, so that's always super exciting. So make sure you don't miss tomorrow's episode. I'll introduce our new sponsor, and we'll talk about him a little bit. I'm still getting some of the ads together, so that's why I'm not introducing him today. Also, on the website, I have started a new channel for the podcast, and it's just going to be replays of all of the live episodes. So if you go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, up at the top, you'll see a link that says live replays, and it'll take you right to the other channel of the podcast, and it's just all of the live episodes. So if there's something you missed or that you want to hear, or, if you just can't listen to the program live in the morning, you can go back and listen to it anytime you want. So go to the website. The link is right there at the top. You'll see it. We begin this morning. We already began with the discussion of the press conference. But if you've been paying attention, the Democrats still have not figured out why they lost. In fact, there was a gigantic conference. I don't know what you want to call it, but the Democrats all got together over the weekend, and they elected a new chair and a new vice chair. And the vice chairman, man, I'm telling you, this guy is somebody that I'm sure you'll know. But from Breitbart News, DNC mocked over woke displays gender ideology obsession. They still don't understand why they lost. And I quote, conservatives on social media joyously mocked Democrats for continuing to engage in wild woke behavior during the Democratic National Committee's leadership vote over the weekend, despite their devastating 2024 election losses. Several moments over the weekend went viral on X, with conservatives pointing out that it appears Democrats have learned absolutely nothing from the 2024 election. They lost the White House. They didn't flip the House of Representatives, and they lost the Senate. DNC Chairman Jamie Harrison announced that the leadership elections had to cater to non-binary people and fill a certain gender quota. Quote, the rules specify that when we have a gender non-binary candidate or officer, the non-binary individual is counted as neither male nor female, and the remaining 6 officers must be gender balanced, Harrison said. Take a listen to what he said.
The rules specify that when we have a gender non-binary candidate or officer, the non-binary individual is counted as neither male nor female, and the remaining 6 officers must be gender balanced. With the results of the previous 4 elections, our elected officers are currently 2 male and 2 female. In order to be gender balanced, we must elect 1 male, 1 female, and 1 person of any gender.
All right. I can't take it anymore. So you get how ridiculous they are, and that they really didn't learn anything from the last election. Across the country, there's been a backlash, a rejection of this woke ideology. But the Democrats in Congress, they never even seem to learn anything from their election losses. And it's much like the Democrats here in Wyoming. It's still massive spending. And if you pay any attention to what's been happening on the floor of the House of Representatives, former Redcoat Speaker of the House, Steve Harshman, is continuing his same old tactics to try to spend as much money as humanly possible. He's got a bill out. I think it's House Bill 8. And what it is to reduce the attendance quotient. I don't know if quotient's the right word, but the attendance number for schools in Wyoming to get their allotment of state funding. So they don't have to have near as many people show up in the school, and they still receive the same amount of funding. So it's the same trick over and over. The Democrats on the national level, they didn't learn anything. And obviously, the Redcoats here in Wyoming didn't learn a darn thing either. I mean, the Redcoats here, they absolutely lost the House, which they had a pretty sizable majority last year. Not so much this year. In fact, there pretty much was a flip. The numbers are almost exactly the opposite of what they were last year. Last year, a lot of the votes were 36-26, 36-26, 36-26. Well, the numbers are absolutely reversed this time. Just about every vote is 36-26, 37-25. I mean, it's almost exactly the opposite. But it doesn't stop with the Democrats electing their new chair. Listen to who they elected as their vice chairman. Back to the Breitbart article, and I quote, Republicans also taunted Democrats over the election of their 24-year-old gun control activist David Hogg as vice chairman of the DNC. Quote, DNC Vice Chair David Hogg has some legitimately insane views that are wildly out of step with the American people. Conservative commentator Steve Guest said, good to see that the Democrat Party has learned absolutely nothing. Here's what Hogg said. Dear America, the Democrats just elected... Oh, no, excuse me, this is continuing on from Breitbart. Dear America, the Democrats just elected a rabid anti-gun activist, David Hogg, as vice chairman of the DNC. Conservative activist Scott Presler said. Now, Scott Presler was largely... he's the guy that gave Pennsylvania to Donald Trump, serious activist. Quote, in 2023, Hogg posted, you have no right to a gun. To every hunter, gun owner in America, it's time to vote. 30% of Pennsylvania hunters are not registered to vote. So you have absolutely no right to a gun. And this is the guy that the Democrats elected as their vice chair. So I think it's fair to say that they've learned absolutely 100% nothing from the election drubbing that they received in 2024. Democrat. Like I always tell you, my friends, redcoats and Democrats, they never change their outerwear. They never change. I mean, you can give them a loss, and they don't back up and try to regroup and assess why they lost, like we conservatives do. Nope. They just try it a different way, which is exactly what you're seeing from the Democrat Party and what you're seeing from the redcoats. In Wildfile this morning, there's an interesting article about House Appropriations Chairman John Bear. Now, over the weekend, he sent out a press release basically accusing the former Appropriations Committee and the governor of, breaking Wyoming spending law. There's a spending policy that's been in place for a really long time, and it would appear that the governor and the former Joint Appropriations Committee has been breaking that spending law. From Wildfile, and I quote, Governor Mark Gordon and two past Joint Appropriations Committees failed to follow a state law governing spending, Representative John Bear alleged Monday in a statement sent to, I guess the press release went out yesterday. The governor, meanwhile, is standing by the budget recommendations Bear called into question and told Wildfile they are both constitutional and in alignment with the law. Bear, a Gillette Republican, said he discovered Gordon's alleged transgression after taking over as chairman of the legislature's House Appropriations Committee, which is now mostly made up of Wyoming Freedom Caucus members. Bear, the former chairman and group of hardline Republicans, is now the bloc's chairman emeritus. Quote, after being sworn in to the 68th legislature, I and my colleagues on the House Appropriations Committee got right to work investigating Wyoming's budgetary obligations, restrictions, reserves, and more, Bear wrote in the statement. There's a new sheriff in town. We have learned a lot, he wrote, and we have also uncovered inconsistencies between the state spending law and the practice by the governor and former legislative appropriators. Bear pointed to a piece of 2016 legislation that changed the state's spending policy. More specifically, Bear said that the law prohibits the governor from recommending an appropriation of the state's rainy day fund, also known as the Legislative Stabilization Reserve Account, or the LSRA, that exceeds 5% of the balance of that account as of the first of the fiscal year in which the recommendation is made. Quote, this law is about living within our means, something our governor has touted with each budget provided to the legislature during his tenure. Unfortunately, the governor has, on more than one occasion, recommended appropriations from the rainy day fund well in excess of the 5% laid out in statute. His statement did not specify how the money was used. In his State of the State last year, let's see here. Let's see if Magpie... No, all right. So let me just go to the press release that was sent out by John Bear, and we can get some of the specifics from it. Go to the horse's mouth, as it were. Let's see here. And I quote... it has been a blessing and an honor to serve as chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. In just a few weeks, I've learned that creating a budget for the state of Wyoming isn't much different from creating a budget for my family. Let's see here. Here we go. In 2016, the Wyoming legislature wisely amended the state's spending policy, establishing criteria for the governor's budget recommendations. The law, Statute 92-1013, subparagraph D, Romanet number 4, provides that any recommended appropriation from the state's legislative stabilization reserve account or rainy day fund shall not exceed in any of the fiscal years 5% of the balance of that account as of the first day of the fiscal year in which the recommendation is made. This change was sponsored by the 2016 JAC, or Joint Appropriations Committee. This law is also about living within our means, which is something, and this is the part that that Mullen mentioned in her piece. Let's see here. In 2019, the governor recommended appropriations from the Lizard totaling $105 million, when 5% of that account that fiscal year was $78.2 million. No member of the JAC made this deviation from the law known, and to my knowledge. Notably, current legislators who were members of the serving on the JAC at that time were prime sponsors of the 2016 amendment, creating this very specific spending limitation. In 2024, the governor again recommended an appropriation of $105 million from the LISRA, when 5% of that account would have been $93.5 million. No member of the JAC made this deviation known to my knowledge. And he goes on in his press release, but the whole point is that the Joint Appropriations Committee and the governor have been spending like drunken sailors. And if you look at last year's budget, you need no further evidence of that. The JAC and the Senate went through a series of pretty sizable spending cuts, and then when it all came down, we had the largest budget in Wyoming's history. So it's very clear to me, at least, that Wyoming has been spending like a drunken sailor, or worse, as Ronald Reagan would say, because the sailors are spending their own money, without really regard to any of their spending policies. Now, of course, I'm sure that the former members of the Joint Appropriations Committee and the governor are going to come out and say, oh, no, there's nothing to see here. No problem here. Don't worry about it. I mean, I don't see why any of us need to pay any attention to any of this, because we were all operating within the law. I'm sure you'll hear that. Well, according to Representative John Baer, they haven't been following the law. Big surprise, surprise. We'll have more when we come back. Christmas is over, and all of the fun holiday cheer has been had. And what are we all left with? Frigid Wyoming weather. Below freezing temperatures that you still have to go out in. That's right, you do have to go back to work at one point or another. And not to scare you, but think about this. Every single morning, you get to scrape the ice off of your windshield. Now, while I can't do anything with that, I can make sure that your feet stay nice and toasty warm while you're doing it. All you have to do is order a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. And to get you a pair of them, go to the website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Wyoming is one of the most sought-after places to live. There's a lot of people that want to move to our great state. And if you're thinking about selling your house to one of them, you need a real estate agent that you can trust. That agent is Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She's lived in Jackson for almost 20 years and has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market. Last year, she sold almost $25 million worth of property. So if you're thinking of buying or selling, give Rebecca a call. Her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new
Well, it seems that the governor is not taking Representative Baer's accusation sitting down. In fact, he says, quote, "My chief of staff responded to the representative's concerns on Friday and offered to work with the Appropriations Committee on this matter. The odd offer still stands. We submitted a balanced budget with substantial savings, and we have cooperated with the Joint Appropriations Committee, and they have worked on the budget since November. Perhaps Representative Baer should be more interested in helping the people of Wyoming recover from devastating wildfires than running his next campaign." It's not an outward denial. It's not a rejection of what John Baer said. It's merely an attack. Pay no attention to what's happening over here. Focus your attention on what's happening here. You always got to watch the other hand with what these redcoats are doing. Then Wildfile talked to Double L Lloyd Larson. In it, he said, quote, "Just because Andy went to Mount Pilot for the day and left Barney in charge doesn't necessarily mean that all his observations are accurate," Larson told Wildfile, "and he needs to be careful about that one bullet he's carrying in his pocket." Now that's not a threat coming from Double L Lloyd Larson at all. The thing is that neither of those two statements are outward denials. In fact, because they don't deny it, you might take that as an affirmation of actually them being guilty of exactly what John Baer is accusing them of. So we'll have to see how that whole thing rolls out. But what I'm saying is, the Appropriations Committee last year and the governor spent way too much money. In fact, their budget resulted in the largest one in Wyoming's history. And for the governor to say, we presented a fair and balanced budget, it's absolutely ridiculous. What they did is they told all the agencies to throw everything they could at the supplemental budget, and then they'll just see what sticks. It's the total shotgun approach. And if you look at that whole 2-inch thick budget, it's pretty clear what the governor was doing. Now, moving on, I've told you for a long time we have to be very skeptical of all of the committees in the Wyoming Senate, because 7 out of 10 of them were pretty much given to the redcoats, and we're starting to have some evidence of that. There were 2 bills specifically related to CO2 production in the state. The first one, and this is from the Cowboy. Legislative Committee kills Make Carbon Dioxide Great Again bill. Now, this is a bill that Senator Sherry Steinmetz put forth to change the definition of what CO2 is, from a pollutant to a positive emission. But let's see what Leo has to say. Quote, "Although President Donald Trump has vowed to repeal all benefits for the green energy policies since taking office, the Wyoming legislature is taking a more measured step on the issue. On Monday, the state Senate Minerals Business and Economic Development Committee declined to advance the Make Carbon Dioxide Great Again bill that would have cut out low carbon energy standards in Wyoming and treated carbon dioxide as a nutrient. No member of the committee made a motion to advance the bill for a vote, amounting to a unanimous rejection from the panel. But it's important to point out who is on the Senate Minerals Committee. That is Senator Stacey Jones, Ed Cooper, Jim Anderson, Senator Slithers, and Chris Rothfuss. Not a single one of them tried to say that, maybe CO2 is plant food. Not a single one of them. And it shouldn't surprise anybody, because if you look at the agenda of the left, it has always been to classify carbon dioxide as a pollutant. The Governor Gordon believes that. He's the one that said, it's CO2. Let's see if I've got a soundbite of him saying that. I bet I do. But it's Governor Gordon who's been, and I think it's right here. Listen to this.
And I know what's happening on the environmental side. We've had several glaciers that have been delisted as glaciers in the West. It is clear that we have a warming climate. It is clear that carbon dioxide is a major contributor to that challenge. There's an urgency to addressing this issue. And it isn't going to be solved only by turning off fossil fuels.
It isn't going to be solved only by turning off fossil fuels, which necessarily means that it isn't going to be solved. That turning off fossil fuels has to be part of that solution. I mean, you got to pay really close attention to what these people say. Well, in the Senate Minerals Committee, not a single one of those people on the panel even seconded the bill, even suggested that maybe CO2 is not a pollutant. Now, let's look at how often members of that committee, and remember, we've been told that all of these Senate committees have a conservative majority on. They're all really, really conservative, and they're all going to do great work in the Wyoming Senate. Okay, so Jim Anderson is the chairman. He votes with the Democrats 82.59% of the time. Stacey Jones, she votes with the Democrats 70.97% of the time. Ed Cooper, 79%. Senator Slithers, 78% of the time. And of course, Chris Rothfuss is a Democrat, so he votes with them almost 100% of the time. So the grand total, the average of the average voting record of all the people on Senate minerals is 82.27% of the time with the Democrats. Now, why did this bill get sent to Senate minerals? My guess would be that it would die a very, very quick death, which is what it did. It didn't even receive a second. So evidently, none of these people on Senate minerals think that CO2 is actually a good thing. They don't believe that it's plant food. And obviously, they don't see the connection between CO2 and the creation of oxygen. Either that or none of them ever went through any sort of biology class whatsoever. So there's the first bill. Now, when we come back from the break, I'm going to tell you about yet another one where it was clearly a bill to deal with CO2 in a conservative way, and the committee absolutely rejected it. So we're going to do that after the break. But first, an absolutely outrageous profit timeout. Somebody's got to pay for this adventure down here in the middle swamp. Well, anyway, we'll have more after the break. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics live every Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. on the Independence Network. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Cowboy State Politics is sponsored by FreedomGoldUSA.com. They are the working man's gold company. The economy is in turmoil. The stock market pretty much is out of control, and you never know what's going to happen with your finances or your income. One way that you can shore up everything is by investing in gold and silver. Go to freedomgoldusa.com/David for a free interview to discuss your options and find out if gold or silver is right for you. One more time, that's freedomgoldusa.com/David. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone. Before we move on, let's go to the phones. Jerry in Rock Springs. It's been a while, my friend. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Been busy, but the weather's sure good.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe down here it is. Up in the north part of the state, it's pretty snowy yesterday.
Yeah, I've just never got to enjoy this kind of weather this time of year. And yesterday at my house, it was 58 degrees.
Yeah, well, I was watching the weather on the whole trip down here, and it said it was 61 in Cheyenne. So I'm thinking, great, I leave the house where it's below zero, and I get down here and it'll be 61. But it wasn't when I got here. I mean, I'm sure the middle swamp was just enticing me to come back. So what's on your mind, Jerry?
Oh, well, just the CO2. I worked out of Jim Bridger Power Plant. It was the largest coal power in anywhere. But I helped with construction, and then I went to work for Pacific Power and worked for them for 36 years. During that process, I was an operator in the scrubbers, which this plant was the very first one to get them. Flack out of Sweden helped design the scrubber process out here to remove SO2. And greenhouse gases are a light gas. They're lighter than oxygen. They're up in the upper stratosphere, I believe. And all people got to do is look at the definition of greenhouse gases and then look what CO2 is, which lays to the ground. And that should tell them everything that they need to know.
Well, this whole thing about CO2 is, I don't think that any of these folks ever opened a biology textbook. That CO2 is not a pollutant. It's necessary to create oxygen. And the truth is, the U.S. produces far less CO2 than any other country on the planet. And I'm just amazed that we have Wyoming legislators that won't even look at it. Just on the program, like Senate Minerals, they wouldn't even second that bill. And so, it's absolutely amazing to me that we can't get a bill like that through the Wyoming Senate.
Yeah, I don't understand. Hopefully the conservatives remain awake and keep active in this legislation, because I think these first 2 years especially are going to be critical.
Oh, absolutely. And, it's I've said for quite a while, well, at least since the legislature's been going on, that we don't really know what the Senate's going to do, because it's kind of a mixed bag over there. But I've got another story here about another bill that deals with the same sort of thing. And that committee, it was Senate Corporations, they killed that bill too. So, I think we really need to have I don't know, maybe an education session with those folks about CO2. But in these two cases, they're not acting very conservative.
No, I don't know. It's like they don't care, I don't know if they think it's, all that problem is just going to go away, or that they're still getting money from it somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, we got to keep our eye on them. Jerry, thanks for the call, my friend. And you take care and enjoy the weather.
All right. No, I listen to you whenever I can.
All right. Thanks, Jerry. Have a good one. All right. If you want to be part of the program, the phone number here at the Swamp Studio in the Middle Swamp is 307-374-8989. If you want to be part of the program, the phone number is 307-374-8989. Go ahead and give me a call. Like I said, I'm going to leave the phone lines open for the entire program. It's been a while since we've been able to talk to. I've been able to talk to our audience. So go ahead and give me a call if you want to. Well, there was another bill that was before Senate Corporations that got killed pretty much in the same way. Now, of course, if you look at Senate Corporations, the chairman is Nancy Case. Then there's Brian Boner, Dan Dockstader, Bill Landon, and Sherry Steinmetz. So this committee is decidedly more conservative than Senate Minerals, the one that we just got done talking about. Now, the bill was, let's see here, Senate File 183, and its sponsor was Larry Hicks. Now, I'm not necessarily in favor of, of a moratorium on building windmills. And let me explain. So Senate File 183 puts a 5-year moratorium on building any of those things. Now, I'm not in favor of that. I think that we should let the free market take care of things. But what that means is that you don't accept any subsidies for building any of these windmills. If you're going to let the free market handle things, then the government needs to get the heck out of the way. And the truth is, with these windmills, the only way that they are profitable is with a government subsidy. I know this for a fact. I've been to several pre-bid meetings about building all of these windmills, and the truth is they are not profitable at all. if you don't have subsidies, you're not going to make money with them. And the reason why you see them cropping up all over the place is because those subsidies are in place. So Larry Hicks's bill would have put a 5-year moratorium on it. And again, I'm not necessarily in favor of the methodology, but I am in favor of the idea. And I think a better way to go about this bill would have been to reject any sort of government subsidy as it relates to wind or solar. That being said, Senate corporations killed this bill. There were 3 against, 2 for. Now, interestingly enough, Nancy Case voted for the bill, and so did Senator Steinmetz. But Brian Boner, Dan Dockstader, and of course, Bill Landon are the ones that killed the bill. So there's 2 really good examples of non-conservative committees that killed, marginally conservative bills. And so I think that you're going to see this trend continue. We're getting really close to crossover in the Wyoming legislature. What crossover is bills from the House go to the Senate and bills from the Senate go to the House. And I think what you're going to see is a lot of these Senate committees either A, water down some of the really good conservative bills that have come out of the House of Representatives, or they're just going to outright put them in file 13 and kill them all. So, I mean, it's going to be an interesting time to watch. Now, another bill that I am not in favor of, and I've gone back and forth on this one, I'll admit that, but it's the shooting sports complex. I don't think that we should, first of all, I don't want the government anywhere near my firearms. I don't want the government building shooting complexes or shooting ranges. I don't think that any of that should be happening. Now, originally, I kind of thought, hey, if we could take some of these tourism dollars and put them towards something good, then that might be a good thing. I mean, the Redcoats were just going to use the tourism dollars to buy condoms and send them to Wyoming Equality. So why not take some of that and do something good? Well, as you might have guessed, and a lot of people pegged this one right, that the price of the shooting complex is starting to balloon. This is another piece from the Cowboy. An article entitled Shooting Complex Budget Swells to $19.5 million, including $3.5 million more from the state. The anticipated budget for the quote-unquote world-class shooting complex near Cody is up from $10 million to $19.5. So now the total project cost has doubled. The anticipated price tag for the shooting sports complex in Cody is nearly $20 million, with construction expected to begin this spring. The Wyoming legislature in 2023 appropriated $10 million to build what backers called a world-class shooting complex. That included $2.5 million from the Wyoming Office of Tourism, $2.5 million from the Wyoming Game and Fish Department, and $5 million from the state's general fund. Several municipalities competed to have the complex built in their communities, and Cody was announced as the winner this past summer. During discussion on the House floor on Monday, Representative Abby Angelos of Gillette said that the legislature's Joint Appropriations Committee agreed to add another $3 million from the Office of Tourism's reserve and project account and $500,000 from the Game and Fish. On top of that, Park County has agreed to pitch another $6 million. Now, remember, all of this is tax dollars. None of it is private investment. Now, originally, I was okay. I mean, I'm still a little on the fence about using $10 million of tax dollars to get this thing started. But I've always maintained that it needs to, as soon as possible, be turned over to a private group. Private enterprise running this thing. But it seems that this is just another example of growing government. I'm not in favor of adding one more cent of taxpayer dollars to this. In fact, I think it ought to be turned over to private investment. But instead, City of Cody, they're adding $6 million. I mean, I am not in favor of this at all. I don't want the government anywhere near my guns, and I don't think that we should be engaged in this. And again, I was originally for it, so I call it a flip-flop if you want, but I've reassessed this thing, and I don't think it's good at all. Let's see here. Yeah, we've got a little bit before the break. We can go this one. So Claire McFarland has a piece in the Cowboy, and this one's entitled "Bill Banning Access to Sex Books for Minors in Wyoming, Back with a Vengeance." And I quote, Campbell County Library District Board member Sage Bear testified in favor of the obscenity bill Monday, February 3rd. And so Sage Bear, who is the wife of Joint Appropriations Committee or House Appropriations Committee Chairman John Bear, she's been heavily involved in the library over in Campbell County. And that's where I would say a lot of the controversy surrounding library books started. And it's a long story, and I've done several episodes on the podcast about this. But that's where, and I frankly, I need to take a little bit of credit for this because when the controversy erupted, it wasn't about library books. It was about a magician that the Gillette Library had hired. And when you looked into this guy, he was a transgender person. And when you looked up his videos on YouTube, they weren't exactly family friendly. And so parents in Gillette got a little ticked off, and the library decided not to host that guy. Well, then the controversy spilled over into library books. I started doing a little bit of research, and I found that there were some really bad books across Wyoming in elementary schools. One of them I found was in the Edmonton Elementary Library, a book called Lawn Boy, which I have to tell you is the absolute worst book. And I have only read the sneak preview on Amazon about it, but like the worst book or pages of a book that I've ever read in my entire life. It was absolutely horrible. There's been several iterations of this bill, and this is the latest one. And I quote, librarians and educators on Monday opposed a wide-ranging proposed bill that seeks to toughen Wyoming's crimes against exposing minors to obscenity and to remove protections that keep librarians and teachers from being charged with a crime. Some library and school board members, conversely, voiced support for the bill. It's a new version of reoccurring legislation back with tougher language that earlier versions that didn't survive. As originally written, House Bill 194 would introduce a new definition of sexually explicit content that is harmful to minors and ban people from sharing that content, including books, movies, and performances with people under the age of 18. The bill's sponsor, Ann Lucas, which I'm going to interview Ann Lucas today at lunchtime, so we'll have an interview with her tomorrow on the podcast. I'm going to ask her about this bill, and we're going to have a conversation about it. But anyway, she offered an amendment that would have excluded references to, quote, nudity. Now, and the whole reason behind this amendment is so that Michelangelo's David wouldn't fall into this definition of obscenity, and well-meant picture, and the way she put it was well-meant pictures of baby butts on social media wouldn't be outlawed, she said. Harmful to minors, quote, would mean content depicting sexual conduct, sexual excitement, or sadomasochistic abuse that appears to be of a prurient interest in sex and is patently offensive. The bill, as written, contains a carve-out for materials with serious literary, scientific, medical, or artistic value for minors. But Lucas is asking the House Judiciary Committee to eliminate that carve-out from the bill before advancing it to the House floor. Another segment of the bill would repeal part of Wyoming's obscenity exception law. This is the one that exempts librarians and teachers from being prosecuted under obscenity. Speaking on House Bill 194's behalf, Gary Brown of Cheyenne told the committee that the proposed repealing of the exemption is about protecting kids. Quote, the very things that citizens on the street would be committing, and be committing a crime, that's a little awkward, if they do the same things to children, said Brown. Just because someone is in a school setting, that doesn't change what's going on or what a child's exposed to. Prosecutors tend to use Wyoming's current obscenity bans against people who show kids pornography. The question I have is if you are a deviant out in society and you're showing kids pornography, you're accused of a crime. But if you're a librarian or a teacher and you're showing your kids patently offensive material, why is that not the same thing? There are many books that are in Wyoming school libraries that are just patently of a prurient nature. Gender queer is one of them that I've talked about on the podcast a lot. There's a lot of different books that detail very, 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 very graphic situations of sex, and in some cases, sex with minors. So we've really got to get a handle on this, and I'm glad that Representative Lucas is championing this bill. Let's go ahead and take our last break, and when we come back from the program, I've got another article from, let's see here. This one's from the Wyoming Tribune Eagle, or the Turkey Vulture, and, well, we already talked about that one. Well, anyway, when we come back, we're going to have more from the Wyoming legislature. There's a lot going on. Things are starting to heat up. Oh, yeah, here it is. Let's talk about the tree zoo in Cheyenne and how it didn't get funding. We'll do that after the break. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live on the Independence Network. You're not going to find a better source of news, information, and entertainment than right here on the Independence Network. Now, we're making a few changes, moving a couple things around, out with the old and in with the new, and that whole spiel. Of course, you could listen to my program, The Ramble Room with Ken Pendergraft, Locked and Loaded with the good Representative Tony Locke from Casper. There's a whole bunch more coming on the Independence Network. Also, don't forget to check out the article section at the website, independencenetwork.us. It's loaded with op-eds, commentary, and news from all around the Cowboy State. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Wyoming's conservative voice, documented to be almost always right 98.979% of the time. A record that the Wyoming media just shouldn't even attempt to eclipse because they just can't. It's not possible because they're not interested in things like facts and doing their research. Anyway, my friends, welcome back to the program. Cowboy State Politics Live on a Tuesday, February 4th. Now, one of the items that I was particularly perturbed about in the last budget was the tree zoo in Cheyenne. Now, the Wyoming legislature decided last year that they were going to put millions of dollars towards the Arboretum in Cheyenne. Now, here is where we need to have a discussion of what is the proper role of government. The truth is that the role of government is actually pretty small. The only thing that they're charged with is, general infrastructure, roads, water, sewer, those sorts of things. It'd be nice to have some police and some fire protection. And of course, you have to have a little bit of government administration. But beyond that, the government doesn't need to be involved in all of these other adventurous things like tree zoos or like Broadway theaters or any recreation type activities or in the landlord business or golf courses or any of these things. On tomorrow's broadcast, I'm going to bring you an example of the Rock Springs mayor saying with all of these budget cuts, we're not going to be able to do all these things that, and he doesn't put it this way, that government is not supposed to be doing. And one of those is an arboretum from the Turkey Vulture. And I quote, in a close vote, the House Appropriations Committee voted down a bill Monday afternoon that would have declared the High Plains Research Station and Arboretum a state historic site. House Bill 229 would have required Wyoming State Parks and Cultural Resources to manage the station and arboretum, and would have required the development of a strategic master plan for the preservation and operation of the site. An amendment to the bill would have provided $2.5 million in funding for the project, which was a substantial cut from the $3.3 million. That's the $3 million I was talking about from last year, that was originally set aside and later stripped from the supplemental budget. The bill failed to pass by one vote, with opposition coming from John Baer of Gillette and Scott Smith and Ken Pendergraft of Sheridan. Those voting in favor of the bill were Abby Angelos and Jeremy Haroldson and Trey Sherwood, and Bill Alamand was exempt from the vote. A mirror bill, Senate File 192, has been assigned to Senate Agricultural, State, and Public Lands and Water Resources, and it could still pass. It is scheduled to be heard at 8 a.m. this morning, or at this time, it would have already been heard. Now, while it's disappointing that we missed the House vote by one vote, we still have hopes that we can get a bill through the Senate side. Cheyenne Botanic Gardens horticulturist Jessica Freese said. Freese spends part of her time taking care of the Arboretum and was one of the many advocates of the bill to testify to the committee on Monday. Quote, this doesn't just benefit Cheyenne, Freese said, addressing the committee. These trees were distributed around the state. Again, it's not government's job to beautify anything. It's not government's job to be involved with trees. That is the role of private entities. There, nowhere in our Constitution does it say that the government should be involved in a tree zoo. Nowhere in the U.S. Constitution does it say that local governments can get involved in beauty projects, pageants or otherwise. This is another ridiculous expense of government that we've allowed, that citizens have allowed to metastasize, because we get sucked in, I guess is a good way to put it, into all these things. Well, we've got this extra money. It'd be really great to put it towards, making our town and our city pretty. Well, that's not the role of government. We've seen this same problem up in my neck of the woods, up in Sheridan, with the $3 million flower pot that was built right by the courthouse. That's not the role of government. It's not the role of government to buy statues or plant trees or anything. That needs to be left to private entities. Good job for the House Appropriations Committee for getting rid of that bill, as they should have. It's just absolutely ridiculous that anybody would propose that. Frankly, we need to strip a lot of those things out of the budget. There's been a lot of discussion this legislative session about what we should be paying for and what we shouldn't be paying for. So, for example, in the supplemental budget, the governor came out and he said that all of these things in the supplemental budget, that they're really only for emergencies. And then if you dig into it, there's things like a $36 million shooting range at the Law Enforcement Academy. Definitely not an emergency. There's money in it from a new arena at the State Fairgrounds in Douglas. While I'll admit that might be nice and we might be able to have some more events there, not an emergency. And I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, more money for the state shooting complex. Again, not an emergency. And it doesn't fit with what a supplemental budget is supposed to do. Those things, and if you read the Wyoming Constitution, it literally says unforeseen circumstances. But in this case, not unforeseen, not in any way an emergency, and yet we're still spending money on them. And again, with the shooting sports complex, you can see that conservatives are to blame just as much as liberals on this one. Well, my friends, we've burned through another busy broadcast hour on the program. Make sure that you don't miss tomorrow's episode of the podcast. That's going to be an interview with Ann Lucas. We're going to talk about her obscenity bill, and she's got a couple of other election integrity measures that I'm going to ask her about. So that's tomorrow on the broadcast. And again, for now, from the depths of the Middle Swamp in Wyoming's capital of Cheyenne, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics.